Nah, man, well, I never said that. I love myself too much, man. Cuff up for what? I'm not a threat to myself or no one else. Tase me, go ahead. No, tase me.
Get on your knees.
Bye, Mom. Bye.
On June 2nd, 2022, deputies with the Marion County Sheriff's Office in Florida responded to a strange and confusing complaint coming from a residential neighborhood in Summerfield. According to dispatch information, a man had allegedly sprayed a woman in the face with a garden hose after an argument outside a home. Witnesses said the suspect appeared extremely agitated and unstable. The situation sounded minor at first, possibly just another domestic disturbance call. But when deputies arrived on scene, they quickly realized this was going to become something far more serious. The man at the center of the incident was identified as John Lee Cronin. As officers stepped out of their patrol vehicles, they immediately noticed tension between John and the woman involved. Deputies separated the two to calm the situation and begin gathering statements individually. At first glance, John appeared disoriented. His speech was erratic. His thoughts jumped from one topic to another without warning, and from the beginning, deputies suspected there was something very wrong mentally or chemically. One deputy approached John calmly and asked a basic question. "Do you need medical attention?" John responded in a scattered and confused manner, claiming he had been hyperventilating. The deputy then tried to understand what had actually happened. "What's going on today?" John answered. "We're arguing," but even while speaking, he struggled to stay focused. He rambled about clothes being inside the house, about wanting to leave, and about the woman wanting him gone. His responses barely connected together. Deputies attempted to assess his mental state using standard orientation questions. "What town are we in?" John paused, then answered. "Summerfield." The deputy continued. "What year is it?" 22. "Who's the president?" John hesitated again before giving a confused answer that barely made sense. At that point, officers became increasingly concerned. His inability to answer simple questions clearly suggested possible intoxication, mental instability, or both. The deputy then asked about the woman involved. "Who is she to you?" "That's my girlfriend," John replied. According to him, the two had been arguing because she wanted him to stop using drugs, and as the conversation continued, John slowly revealed more alarming details. He referenced narcotics. He talked emotionally about life falling apart, and he repeatedly shifted between calmness and agitation within seconds. Meanwhile, the woman inside the house could be heard yelling in the background, accusing John of destroying their lives through drug use and reckless behavior. Deputies tried to keep the situation under control, but it was becoming obvious that emotions inside the home had already exploded long before police arrived. Then suddenly, John changed the direction of the conversation entirely. He began talking about the Baker Act. In Florida, the Baker Act allows authorities to place someone under involuntary mental health evaluation if they are believed to be a danger to themselves or others. John seemed terrified that deputies were planning to Baker Act him. He immediately became defensive. "I'm not trying to hurt myself," he insisted. "I'm not trying to hurt anybody." But officers weren't convinced. At this point, John's behavior had become increasingly unpredictable. He appeared paranoid, emotionally unstable, and disconnected from reality. Still, deputies continued speaking calmly. They weren't trying to escalate the situation. They simply wanted to determine whether John was a threat to himself or anyone around him. For a brief moment, things appeared to settle down. John walked outside with one of the deputies and even asked for a cigarette. An officer allowed someone from the house to bring him one in hopes that calming him down might prevent the situation from turning violent. For a few minutes, it worked. John smoked quietly while deputies maintained distance and continued talking to him. But beneath the surface, tension was building rapidly. As officers discussed the possibility of detaining him for evaluation, John's demeanor changed again. The calmness disappeared. His body language stiffened. His breathing quickened. And then he started making alarming statements. "You're gonna have to tase me, dude." One deputy tried to reassure him. "No one wants to tase you." But John wasn't listening anymore. "You're gonna shoot me." "No," the deputy answered firmly. But the paranoia had already taken over. Deputies repeatedly instructed him to turn around and place his hands behind his back. John refused. "I'm not cuffing up." Officers attempted to de-escalate. They spoke slowly. they kept distance. They avoided physical force for as long as possible, but John continued backing away and shouting, "Don't touch me." Then the situation exploded. As deputies moved in carefully to place him into custody, John suddenly resisted. He pulled away aggressively. He screamed. He thrashed violently. And within seconds, deputies deployed a taser. John collapsed to the ground, screaming, "Kill me! I don't care!" The scene instantly turned chaotic. Officers struggled to gain control, while John continued resisting, yelling incoherently, and refusing commands. At one point during the struggle, he managed to knock both deputies' body cameras off their uniforms, sending them flying into the grass. Even after being tased, John still refused to cooperate. "Don't tase me again." Then only seconds later, "I'm gonna make you tase me again." His emotions swung wildly from rage to desperation. One moment he screamed at officers. The next, he called out to his girlfriend emotionally, "You said you loved me." Deputies finally managed to pin him down and secure him in handcuffs after a prolonged struggle, but even then, the incident was far from over. As officers attempted to move him toward the patrol vehicle, John suddenly admitted something shocking. "I'm under the influence of heroin and ice," he said. "I need help. I can't wait. I can't wait." The statement immediately changed the entire situation. What had started as a domestic disturbance had now become a possible overdose emergency. And within minutes, John's condition would begin rapidly deteriorating in the back of the patrol car. That's where everything took another dangerous turn. By the time deputies finally got John Lee Cronin into the back of the patrol vehicle, the chaotic struggle outside the home had left everyone exhausted. Officers were breathing heavily. Their uniforms were covered in dirt from wrestling him to the ground. And despite the resistance, screaming, and threats moments earlier, John's behavior suddenly began changing again. The aggression faded almost instantly. Now he looked weak, disoriented, barely conscious. As deputies closed the patrol car door, John continued mumbling emotionally to the people standing nearby. "Hey, Mom, get all my stuff." Then he yelled toward his girlfriend, "If you still want to be with me, it is what it is." And then, bizarrely, he started celebrating the fact that he was going to jail. "I'm going to Marion County, yippee-yay." The emotional swings were becoming more extreme by the minute. One second he sounded defeated, the next, euphoric, then angry, then terrified. Deputies had already suspected drug intoxication earlier, but now the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. As officers prepared to transport him, John suddenly complained that he couldn't move his legs. "I can't lift my legs up, dude." Deputies attempted to help him into the vehicle, but his body appeared limp and uncooperative. Eventually, officers had to physically drag and reposition him inside the patrol unit. One deputy later admitted the arrest actually went better than expected, considering how violent the struggle had become once John resisted. But there was still a serious problem. John's physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. Because of that, EMS personnel were called to the scene to evaluate him before deputies could take him directly to jail. When paramedics arrived, they immediately began assessing his vital signs. At first, officers hoped medical staff would simply clear him for transport to the Marion County Jail. But after observing John closely, EMS became increasingly concerned. His heart rate was elevated, his speech was fading in and out, and he appeared dangerously lethargic. Then deputies informed paramedics about John's own statements. He had claimed to be under the influence of both heroin and methamphetamine, commonly referred to on the street as ice. That combination immediately raised alarms. Heroin is a depressant capable of slowing breathing to deadly levels. Methamphetamine, meanwhile, aggressively overstimulates the body and nervous system. Together, the mixture can create extreme physical and psychological instability. Paramedics decided they couldn't take chances. To counter the possibility of an opioid overdose, EMS administered Narcan, a nasal spray designed to rapidly reverse the effects of opioids like heroin. Meanwhile, John sat handcuffed in the back of the patrol vehicle, barely able to hold himself upright. At one point, he slumped sideways so heavily that it appeared he might fall completely out of the seat. Deputies now faced a different kind of emergency. The violent suspect they had struggled with minutes earlier was suddenly becoming medically unstable. EMS personnel discussed the situation carefully. Technically, deputies wanted to get him booked into jail as quickly as possible. But medically, transporting him straight to jail no longer seemed safe. Paramedics explained that because of his symptoms combined with the suspected drug use, he needed hospital evaluation first. The decision was made. Before going to jail, John would be transported to the hospital. Deputies opened the patrol vehicle and attempted to help him stand, but John could barely support his own weight. "My legs, bro," he mumbled weakly. Officers eventually lifted him and guided him toward the ambulance. The contrast was shocking. Just minutes earlier, he had been violently resisting arrest, screaming at deputies, threatening to force them to tase him again. Now he could barely walk. Inside the hospital, doctors and nurses immediately began evaluating him. Thankfully, despite concerns about overdose symptoms, John did not vomit or lose consciousness completely during transport. But hospital staff still needed to determine whether he was suffering from overdose complications, drug-induced psychosis, or another medical emergency. While at the hospital, investigators also took the opportunity to question him about what happened earlier. By now, John seemed calmer, exhausted, emotionally drained. An officer began reading him his rights before asking basic questions. "Do you understand your rights?" John quietly answered yes. Then came the most important question. "What brought you here today?" John struggled to answer clearly. The deputy continued. "Why did you resist the deputies?" At first, John appeared confused. Then the officer reminded him, "You swung and punched one of the deputies." John looked down. "Ah, man." The deputy pressed further. "Why did you resist where they had to use their taser?" And John gave an answer that revealed just how detached from reality he had become during the incident. "Because they were going to shoot me," the officer immediately corrected him. "No one was trying to shoot you." John stared blankly for a moment, then admitted something important. "I don't remember much." Investigators asked if he remembered arguing with his girlfriend. He nodded slightly, but much of the confrontation appeared blurred in his memory. The deputy then explained the reality of the situation. "We were there to help you, not hurt you." John quietly responded, "Oh, I don't know." It was a completely different version of the man deputies encountered earlier outside the house. Gone was the screaming, gone were the threats, gone was the manic energy. Now he appeared broken, exhausted, and heavily affected by whatever substances had been in his system. But despite his calmer state, the legal consequences were already unavoidable. Once doctors completed their evaluation and medically cleared him, John was officially transported and booked into the Marion County Jail. And the list of charges against him was serious. Authorities charged him with 3 counts of battery, 2 counts of resisting arrest. Most significantly, multiple charges involved battery against law enforcement officers after he allegedly struck deputies during the struggle. Eventually, prosecutors reached a plea agreement in the case. According to court records, John pleaded guilty to 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer, 1 count of resisting an officer with violence. In exchange, additional charges were dropped. Ironically, throughout the entire confrontation, John repeatedly insisted he wasn't going back to jail. Life goes on. He had told deputies confidently earlier in the encounter. But in the end, despite all his shouting, resistance, and attempts to avoid arrest, he did go back to jail. And according to reports, he would remain there for the foreseeable future. What began as a simple disturbance call involving a garden hose and an argument between a couple had escalated into a full-scale mental health crisis, violent arrest, suspected overdose situation, and felony criminal case, all unfolding in less than a single afternoon. For deputies on scene, it was another reminder of how quickly unpredictable behavior, narcotics, and emotional instability can transform an ordinary police call into something dangerous for everyone involved. And for John Lee Cronin, June 2nd, 2022 became a day that spiraled completely out of control from beginning to end.